ahead and have a seat. Glad you're with us here today. Very excited to continue on in our series. In your bulletin, I'm going to tell you something else that I'm really excited about. This Father's Day invitation card that you have, well, I had. Here it is in your bulletin. I'm excited about this, not only because there's root beer floats and pulled pork nachos, but there's going to be an opportunity. When it says games there, we're going to get this like inflatable race that we're hoping dads will challenge their kids to. And let me tell you why I'm excited about that. Because my son, he's only 6 years old. 6 years old, and he already thinks he can beat dad. Now, that's going to be true when he's about 8 years old, when he's about my size, okay? But I still got 2 years on him. So I'm looking for a peak moment right here to just humiliate my son. So if you want to see that great parenting moment, make sure you're here on Father's Day. But we love to see all the dads here having fun with their kids. There's nothing more just awesome to see families interacting with each other and watching dads crush young boy dreams, right? There's just something manly about that. No, we're very excited and think it'll be really fun. Now, what we're doing is we're doing a series called Irrational Generosity. Irrational generosity, which means when God talks about money, when God talks about finances, when Jesus was here on earth, he talked about two really big topics. Jesus' top two topics were money and hell. Yeah, both of those two. I know, Jesus was totally PC, right? Nobody comes into church and wants to talk about usually those two things. And yet, on our Savior's lips, this was the biggest topics. And what we're going to do this Sunday is try to cram both of those into one message. So we're going to take the two hardest ones, but the most popular ones, and try to put them together. And as we close out this series, here's the question I want to ask us. I want to ask us this question. Can money, can wealth solve more problems or create more problems? When you think about your money, when you think about the amount of money that you have, maybe you just had a great windfall, maybe you just won the lottery and you're looking for a church to tithe to. That's not Avenue Christian Church. Direct message from God. No, just kidding. Right? But when you see a lot of money, maybe it's a raise you didn't expect. Right? Maybe it's a birthday card from a great aunt who just put in the wrong bill and you're like, wow, what do I do with this one? In those moments when there is a great amount of money, just a huge windfall, unexpected amount of cash, do those big amounts of money, are they going to solve problems or create problems? Well, I think they can solve problems. Definitely. I think money is a very useful tool. Money is not a bad thing per se, and we know this. Money can solve global problems. Let me give you an example. If you just took every American, not just adults, kids, if you took every single American and every American gave $7, just $7 a month, $7 a month, that's like what you spend on Starbucks or 7 Leaves or whatever your coffee, or drink addiction is. Imagine just 7 months. And now if you're me, I spend a lot more on coffee than $7 a month. I'm like $7 a day, right? But $7 a month, if every American gave $7 a month, do you know what can happen? We can solve world hunger and death from preventable diseases in 5 years. If every American, not anybody else, if every American gave $7 a month, $7 a month for 5 years, we could solve global hunger and death from preventable diseases in 5 years. Can money solve problems? Man, absolutely. Money can solve big problems, so it's not bad. But let's look on the other end, though. Can money create problems? Yes, money can create problems. A perfect example is the lottery. Now, I remember growing up as a kid, we grew up on welfare. We grew up in Section 8 housing. My family grew up very poor, to American standards, of course. We didn't own a car. We took a bus everywhere. We couldn't afford a bus pass. We walked everywhere. We walked to the doctor's office. We walked to school. We walked to the grocery store, right? And just carried the groceries that me, my sister, and my mom, that's all that we could carry, right? The reason they put those little locks on the carts, right? It's because of families like me, because we would take the cart 2.5 miles all the way home, right? And we'd bring it back next week when we needed groceries. But this was kind of how I grew up. And so I remember dreaming at night, if I won the lottery, what would I do? I would say as a young boy, that was probably 80% of my dreams. Is I would just sit there and think, oh man, what would I do? Man, I would buy a car. I would buy a house. I would buy an endless supply of skateboards and video games, right? I was still a teenage boy, right? And this was my number one. I'm just going to be honest with you here. My number one was I'd buy a helicopter. I have this weird fantasy of flying a helicopter everywhere I want to go. It's easy to get around traffic. It just seems a lot better. You don't have to worry about customs. You just up, move, down. That's what I would do. I would buy myself a helicopter. Now, that dream, right, is playful. It's fun. It seems like it solves some problems. But the lottery actually can become a nightmare. A nightmare. There's a man by the name of John Whitaker, who won the lottery in West Virginia. $315 million right there, one fell swoop, boom. After a couple years of enjoying this large sum of money, he was interviewed and he said this, said this to the Times, I wish I would have torn up the ticket because all of the problems it created. Do you know this? If you win the lottery, you are more likely to declare bankruptcy than if you had not won the lottery. People who win the lottery are more likely to declare bankruptcy within 3 to 5 years than the average American. So if you win all of that money, you are now more likely to lose it all and have nothing left. There's a man who wrote a book, Lessons from Lottery Winners. He's a financial consultant, has worked with a lot of lottery people, and this is what he said. He said, these lottery winners, he says, many of them deal with suicide, depression, and divorce. Does that sound like they won something? That sounds like they lost something. It sounds like there was a great problem there. So how do we prevent this? How do we prevent our money from becoming a great problem? How can money be more of a solution, like we first talked about, than a problem? Well, I think Jesus answers this question. I want you to take the pen out of the seat back in front of you. I want you to find a spot in your bulletin there. If you look on the first page when you open it up, right there in the middle, it says big idea. I think this is Jesus' solution to the problem of how do I prevent money from becoming a problem? How can I use wealth in a way that's not going to hurt me, but it's rather going to solve problems? So here's what I want you to do. If you're going to write down any piece of note, any sentence in this whole message, I want you to take this one sentence down. So there's a pin in the seat back in front of you. Go ahead and grab that. Open your bulletin. In the middle, this is what we're going to say. My money becomes my problem. My money becomes my problem. The emphasis there is on my. My money becomes my problem. Selfish wealth becomes a severe problem. When we have this idea of my money and this my mentality, money turns all of a sudden. It turns into a great problem, and not just a small problem, but probably the greatest problem you could possibly think of. It turns into an eternal problem. Let me show you this in Luke chapter 12. In Luke chapter 12, in the New Testament, so if you go about halfway through your Bible, keep turning to the right, you're going to find a book called Luke. Matthew, Mark, Luke. And in Luke chapter 12, Jesus gives us this teaching that my money, this my mentality to money, causes a severe problem, an eternal problem, a problem that could not be bigger. And so I want to show you this in Luke chapter 12, and then I want to give you the most practical, helpful step I could possibly think of to help you not have a my money problem and not have your money turn into a problem, or rather your money turn into solutions. So let's look at what Jesus teaches, and I want to give you a very practical way to keep the my out of money. Okay, let's look at Luke chapter 12. We're going to start with verse 13. Now, as we enter here, here's what we're going to see. Jesus, on 2 occasions, is going to shock us. He's going to surprise us. The story's going to start, and everything looks good. But then Jesus, because he's God and man at the same time, sees more than what we see. Jesus sees beyond the surface, looks into the heart of what's going on, and gives us kind of this shocking reality to what's happening. So I want to prepare you. These two turns, these two tension moments, these two surprise or shocking moments have much meaning for us as Jesus is trying to teach us about money. Let's look at the first one. This is just Jesus' encounter. He's walking along, he's teaching. Verse 13, he encounters this man from the crowd. Verse 13 says this. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Okay, let's stop there. Inheritance, this large windfall of money. This great sum of money is coming this man's way. And so this man comes up to Jesus and says, "Jesus, you've got to decide things for us. We're having trouble here." Now, this may seem odd. Not many of you have come up to me and say, "Pastor Paul, I have some financial troubles. I need you to figure them out for me." Right? Nobody really comes to me as to be an arbiter or a lawyer to break up your inheritance among your siblings. Nobody does that. Or at least they haven't done it yet. But this is not uncommon. In fact, this shows a great amount of respect to Jesus. Because rabbis or teachers in the first century in Judaism would often take these kind of requests and they would deal with these kind of cases. So this man coming up to Jesus immediately says, "Teacher, rabbi," right? "You're an authority in my life." He places Jesus higher than him and says, I need your help here. There's a discrepancy when it comes to the inheritance. Now, what we should expect is Jesus could very easily solve this problem. The Bible is very clear in the book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament. In chapter 21, it explains, here's how you divide the inheritance. The older son gets a double portion. Everybody else gets a single portion. Very easy, very simple. You just take the amount of kids that you have, you divide up whatever the sum is, and that is one portion. You make sure the older brother has a double portion. And the funny thing of Deuteronomy, it says, even if he's not the favorite, even if you don't like him, you still give him double, right? So the older ones in the crowd are like, yes. Okay, we're not under Old Testament law anymore, so that doesn't mean anything. If you're not the favorite, you're not getting any money, okay? That's what parents are allowed to do. They can give it however they want to do it. But Jesus can very easily solve this problem. It's a good question. Jesus has a simple answer, and yet he doesn't give it. All right, here's the shock, here's the turn, here's the twist where we see something deeper is happening here. Look what Jesus says. Verse 14. But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbiter over you?" Now, right away, right out of the gate, Jesus says, "Man." And the way he's using it here in the language, it seems like more of a harsher, correcting tone. Jesus sees something. Something's going on in this man's heart. And Jesus just retreats from the opportunity. I'm not a judge. I'm not a financial consultant. I'm not a lawyer. Why is Jesus retreating from a very simple problem? Look back at the question in verse 13. See what this man is asking, and I think we're going to find some hints in the way he asks the question. Look what he says. Jump up to verse 13 again. "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." What is the man actually doing there? Did the man come up to him and said, "Hey, my brother and I have agreed that we need a third party. So we would like you, Jesus, Son of God, to be that third party, to arbitrate objectively in this case." Does he tell him that? Absolutely not. He runs up to him, almost like I could see like a 6-year-old pulling on dad's coat. "Hey, she did this. Do you punish her?" Right? That's what he's doing. Hey, go tell him to do something. He doesn't want Jesus' judgment. He wants Jesus' endorsement. He's biased. He already knows this is the case. This is my money. Right? This is my inheritance. Tell him to give me. This is mine. And Jesus says, I'll have no part of this. And Jesus can peer into this man's heart and say, there's greed in your heart. You have a severe problem, right? Look what he says. Verse 15. And he said to them, now Jesus is opening this up here. He sees this in this man and he decides this is a great lesson, not for this man only to learn, but for everybody else. I think this includes, of course, Jesus' followers, his disciples. So he looks at everybody and says, let me tell you what I've seen in this man. Look what Jesus says. Take care, be on guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possession. Life is not about building up your list of my stuff. And Jesus is saying what happens is when your life is like this, when you build up possessions, what happens? You start to push away people. The more you try to attract possessions to yourself, the more likely you are to push people away from yourself, like your brother. Right? That's this case here. I think many of us can attest to this. Maybe a relative, a grandparent, or your parents have passed away. Right? And then you're in charge of how the money is dispersed. Nobody wants that job. Nobody. Okay, I've gone through that on two separate occasions. None of them turn out well. It's never good. It's never fun. It's always fighting. It is. And it's very, very sad that that day turns into that. And that's what's happening for this man. And Jesus is saying, no, friend, you have a bigger concern. A bigger concern in you not getting your share of the inheritance is what's happening in your heart. Realize what Jesus is doing here. This man probably has a lot to inherit. That's why there's a fight. And it says older brother. It sounds like there's only two of them. So whatever this sum is, it's going to be divided in very large portions. And Jesus says, more important than this large sum of money coming to you is there is something devastatingly wrong in your heart that's going to push you away from your brother. Very clearly, Jesus says, your my money mentality is creating a problem. But Jesus doesn't leave it there. Jesus is going to use a story. He's going to tell a parable. And in this parable, he's going to show how big is this problem. Okay, Jesus, it's a problem. Okay, Jesus, I should be aware of this. Jesus just told the disciples about 4 chapters ago that the love of riches and the love of the pleasures of life can choke out your discipleship, can choke out your faith. Jesus told a story of sowing seed. And the example was when a seed is sown and it grows, it's like you start your faith, you start following Jesus, the plant grows, and Jesus says things will come and they'll choke out that plant. They'll kill that plant, and the faith that started won't finish. And you know what chokes out the plant? Riches, pleasures of life, the cares of life. So Jesus is probably looking into the eyes of his disciples and saying, you need to be aware of this. What's happening in this man's heart can happen in yours. Even though these disciples are poor, greed is a problem for the rich and for the poor. And he's saying, beware, this problem is big. How big is the problem? The story will tell us. Look at verse 16. Jesus is going to tell this parable to describe and illustrate how big is the problem when I have a my money mentality. Does it just push away my brother? No, it does much, much more than that. Again, look at verse 16. This is going to start good, and then there's all of a sudden a surprise, a twist, a shocking moment. Look at verse 16. And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentiful. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns, and I will build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. Now stop right there. Does anything look bad in this situation? Not really. Is the man presented as a cheat? As a con artist? Is he creating some sort of Ponzi scheme, right? No, this man's wealth has come from the land, which I think is very interesting. Because frequently in the Old Testament and the New Testament, God is said to be the one behind bountiful crops. So I think if we knew this man, if we could just throw ourselves into the parable, throw ourselves into the story, we would probably say, man, you're blessed. Right? Have you ever used that kind of vocabulary before? Somebody gets a raise. Somebody gets a promotion. Right? So somebody wins a lot of money. And we use the term, man, you're blessed. Man, God's favor is on you. There's no hint that this man is disobedient. No hint that this man is really just storing up all this stuff. So when there's a famine, in the land, he can charge a high price. We don't see that. There's nothing conniving in this man. And it seems very apparent that God has blessed this man greatly. But again, God sees more. God sees much more than the surface, much more than the windfall, much more than the advance, much more than the promotion, much more than the raise. Jesus sees something more. And I think it's shocking what God says to this man. He doesn't call him blessed. Look what he says to him. Look at God's response. Verse 20. God said to him, "Fool." Fool. What does that mean? I think in the modern Western American era, we think fool as in foolish. You did something dumb, right? You're not a good planner. But that is not the idea in the Old Testament. It's not the idea in first century Judaism what fool means. Fool doesn't mean low IQ. Fool doesn't mean that you can't foresee things in the future. You can't see how markets go. It's not about that. Fool has such a deeper meaning than that. In Psalms 14, right in the middle of the Bible, the 14th Psalm says this: "A fool says in his heart, there is no God." What is God saying to this man? You've done all this planning without me in mind. You're only thinking of yourself. You have never thought of what this money means for your relationship with me. You have a my money mentality, and now you have a problem. A huge problem. Not that you're just unwise, but it's clear that you and I don't have a good relationship. That you and I are estranged. That you are bankrupt before me. That your wealth towards yourself is poverty toward me. And look what this man loses. Look what he loses. Jesus, of course, God first says, "Fool." It says this: "This night your soul is required of you. The things you have prepared, whose will they be?" That last question, whose will they be? Jesus is not thinking here in this parable that the answer is, well, it's my sons or my daughters. It's not an inheritance issue. His point in that question is not to say, well, how are we going to divide this thing up? That's not his point. His point is this: the person who will not enjoy this stuff is you. You stored up all of this wealth, all of this stuff, and you'll never see the joy that comes from it. So what did the man lose? Well, he lost everything, right? He lost everything he put in those barns. His success brought him reward, and he lost all of it. All of it. And it says sudden, too. It says that it just comes this night. What's the point there? I think what's trying to happen here in the setting of the story is that right when the last barn is completed, when the last piece of wood is connected, and he's about on the cusp of enjoying, tomorrow he's planned a party. It's going to be great. It's going to be abundant. It's going to be awesome. I'm finally ready. Everything is stored. Everything is locked up. I got the safe. I got the code. I got the thing that scans your eyeball. Everything. Nobody's taking my money. Mission Impossible can't come from the roof. I'm safe, right? The idea is, as he's planning the party, writing the checks to the caterers, all of that stuff, that night before the party, it's all gone. That's the idea. Is right before he gets to enjoy, he loses all of it. All of it's gone. Now that may be shocking, and that may seem severe, and that seems like a big problem, but that's not even the depth of the problem. It's not even close. This man loses so much more than what he had. Look first at what God said to him. Again, verse 20. "Fool, this night your soul is required of you." Now, interesting. He didn't say, "I'm taking all your stuff." No, he calls him fool, which clearly is about his relationship with him. And then he says, your soul today, tonight, is required of you. What did he lose? He lost eternity. Now, Luke, the writer of this book, is very specific and focused on speaking about riches and poverty. It's speaking about those who don't have much and those that have much. If you just look down in your Bible, you go to Luke chapter 9, Jesus said that, what does it profit to a man if he were to gain the whole world and lose himself? Do you see what's happening there, the contrast there? If you gained everything, but you lost yourself. Jesus, after this, we were in Luke 12. If you just flip over to Luke 16, second half of Luke 16, Jesus tells another story. The story, and this is the time he names the man in the story. His name is Lazarus. He's a poor man, but there's a rich man who experienced a wealth of enjoyment because of those resources that he had. But in a moment, one night, they both lose their life, and the man loses everything. But more than what he had, he loses what he never had. He loses out permanently on a relationship with God, and he finds himself in judgment. He finds himself in hell. So just on the bookends of this kind of understanding of gaining the world, losing self, the rich man losing everything, and not just what he had temporarily, but losing eternity. That's where we find our story in Luke 12, sandwiched in between those two realities. So what is Luke trying to show us here? What is Jesus trying to show us here? This man has lost eternity. And there's no getting anything back. There's no declaring bankruptcy. There's no government bailout. It's over. It's done. Loss. For all eternity. Estranged from his maker. Estranged from the one who gave him the bountiful harvest. His greed blinded him to God. His wealth was selfish, was toward himself. And it pushed not only people away, which I think is Jesus' point to that first question, but it pushes God away. Do you see how severe the problem is? It's not about just winning the lottery and then declaring bankruptcy. It's not just getting this great windfall, then dealing with all the people trying to grab at money, and then you get depressed. No, there's much more on the line. It's your soul. And Jesus sees this in a very simple question about inheritance. He sees greed in the heart. And he sees it in there and he says, no, 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 no. This is not what your heart was meant to long for. This is not what you're meant to covet. It's not meant for you to run after. You're meant to run after God. You're meant to run after to your Creator. You're meant to run after to the benevolent, merciful God who paid out the payment for sin in His Son, who bought you through His death and resurrection, has offered you the gift of forgiveness, and wants you to be reconciled to Himself through faith. And yet this transaction cannot happen because all you're thinking about is the transactions here. This is why Paul says twice, on two different occasions, writing to two first-century churches, that greed is idolatry. Greed leads to worshiping a false god of self. Money can be a huge problem, but it's not money that's the problem. Look at how Jesus concludes this. All right, brings the story to its focal point. Verse 21. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself. My money becomes my biggest problem. But is it money that's the problem? No. Right? The next statement, in the same breath, Jesus says what? He contrasts this idea of my money, and he says what? And is not rich toward God. Very easily, Jesus says you can use money to solve problems. Money is a good thing. I have given money. We're seeing that. A biblical view of money is that God is the giver of that money, and we are stewards of that money. You can be rich toward God. It's not about how much money you have, but it's about how you view your money. And if you have a my money mentality, it becomes a big problem. Well, how do you relieve that? How do you get the my out of my money? Jesus, very simply, you insert him, his. It's his money. It's not my money. It's his money. It may be stored in my bank account, but it's his money. And what does his money do? His money solves problems. His money can solve global hunger. His money can solve the problem of preventable diseases. His money can build churches. His money can pay for comfortable seats. His money can pay for air conditioning. His money can pay for the printing of Bibles. Money is not a bad thing. But when my creeps in, it becomes a devastating thing. So because this is so important, then what do we do to stop it from happening to us? Do you know what God's number one weapon is against greed? God's number one weapon against greed, against this problem happening. It's giving. Why giving? Because when the money comes in, what do you say first and foremost? You don't say my, you say his. Consistent, faithful, habitual giving. Faithful giving. It's interesting from the very first pages of the Bible to the very end. Again, Jesus' favorite topic, or one of them, was money. Why? Because it can be such a problem. But not just that. It could be such an asset, a tool in the hands of those who don't try to possess it. It can bring people to God. What a wonderful thing. But God has always instituted an idea of habitual, faithful giving. Old Testament, New Testament. And what does that do? Every time it comes in, you say, his. His, 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 over and over and over and over again. And what does that do? That breaks the my inserting itself into the situation. If you just keep saying his, it has no opportunity to grow. It's like spraying a Roundup on the weed of greed. You just keep killing it. So let me give you a very, 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 very practical way to do that. To take the my out of your money and to put him in. Okay, it's a lesson I learned from a yellow piece of paper. Okay, now this is slightly embarrassing, but we're just going to be real and honest. Okay? Now, because I'm going to be real and honest, and this is slightly embarrassing, I want you to embarrass yourself too. So if you know what I have behind my back, I just want you to say, just raise your hand. Okay, that's all I want you to do. If you can tell from where you are, now if you've got one of these, you can probably tell, even if you're way out there. Does anybody know what this is right here? Oh, hold on. Let me help you. Okay. Does anybody know what this is? You're just all better people than me. I need to go to your church. You need to come up here and preach to me. Right? Nobody knows what this is. Nobody. Late water bill. Thank you. One guy, honest. No. This is a lesson I learned, okay? This is a lesson that I've learned. Look, let me help. See, you break this part off, and then it hooks right onto your door. Nobody see it? Everyone's like, I got one. How did he know? This is actually yours. This is from Dennis Smith, row 3. No, I'm just kidding. Right? I hope there's not a Dennis Smith. That would be really creepy. Okay, well, what do I learn from this? You know the bill that I never can pay on time? Ever. I pay all my bills on time. All of them. Except for this one. Do you know why? Because the wonderful city of Buena Park, which I love very much, will for some reason not allow me to just automatically pay it. Every other bill, I can pay my gardener that way, but Buena Park can't figure it out, right? Every bill I pay all my bills on time. I pay several bills early. I pay extra on certain bills. All my saving stuff comes out. right? My kids' college fund, my family's Christmas fund, my vacation fund, my retirement, everything. Everything is automatic. I've set it up. I do my budget every month. I set all the amounts, set everything up. Everything is perfect. Stuff goes out. I get a little alert on my phone because I'm a money manager person. I tell every dollar where to go. I love that kind of stuff. My spreadsheet is awesome. It's color-coded. It even changes colors when things don't work right. I love this stuff, but I keep getting this guy, right? And here's why. I'll give you my account number, man. I know how much it is about. It only varies really 10, 15 bucks. But they'll make me every time put in the amount and then send out the check. Just take it out. Just take it out. This guy tells me, Paul, you didn't pay your bill. Okay, now let me be honest with you here. Now this is the part that's more embarrassing than this. Okay? When it came to my giving habit, right, giving to the church, this is kind of what would happen. And nobody came to me. Nobody put a door hanger. That would be really embarrassing. Nobody gave a door hanger on. This guy's not giving. Okay, they wouldn't do that. But I remember I would just forget. You know, you get to church, you get in there, and let's be honest, hardly any of us carry cash, and I don't even know what a checkbook is. Okay, you just forget that stuff. I forget. Then I'd get there and be like, oh no, I'll get it when I come home. No, I'm not going to get it when I come home. I got kids at home, right? I got to figure all that stuff out. And then there would be times where okay, I'll give, we'll set up everything up and I tell all the money where to go and everything usually works out. So I'll just give at the end of the month when the first of the month comes around and the budget kind of resets itself. And what usually happened? I didn't give as much as I wanted to give. And my wife and I, we just kind of had this come to Jesus moment where she came to me and said, hey, by the way, are we meeting our giving goal? Right? Are we doing that? How much are we giving? And it was sad to see. Oh, there'd be consistency for this amount, but then maybe there'd be half in 1 month, right? Or things would drop off. And look, I love Boynton Park. I love the water company, but I don't want to get one of these from God. And then I realized this, Paul, just make it automatic. Everything is automatic. And why is everything you've set up automatic? You know why? Because it's important. I don't want to miss my saving goals, right? I don't want to miss my mortgage payment. I don't want to miss all those things. So I set them on autopilot. I set it on automatic. And I'll tell you right now that my family meets our giving goal because we made it automatic. We just set it up. We just set it up, set the amount. I get a little alert on my phone, right? When it tells me, you gave. I love that. Hey, babe, we gave, right? Isn't that awesome? I don't have to worry when I come into church. Did we bring cash? Right? Did we bring a checkbook? Did you write it? Did I write it? Finding a pen in my house is almost impossible. Right? Finding a checkbook is just ridiculous. Maybe some of you don't need this option. And good on you. Good on you. But I think some of you are like me. And if you looked at your giving, it wouldn't make you smile. You'd say, you know what, I missed it here. Now, maybe you wouldn't feel like you're this far, but you'd feel like, you know what, we're just not meeting the giving goal that we want. And God means a ton to us, and His work means a ton to us. And it's His anyways. So here's what I want to invite you to, very, very practical. There's a slide right here on the screen. I'll make it super, 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 super easy for you. Right there it says, if you text this comment, give KCC. So that's your text. You text it to the number 77977. We have a company, right, that we use as a church. Global company. Safe, secure, automatic giving. We love this. I love this. I did it at my church up north, made it automatic. When I came down here, I did the same exact thing. This is how I met my giving goal every year. And we share our giving goal with our kids. And I want to be able to tell my kids, look at what we did. Look, we went over and beyond. Here's how much we're going to give to the Lord this year. If everything works out like we think it will, this is how much we're going to give to God. And how do we faithfully meet that goal? It's because we set it up automatic. It's intentional with our generosity. Now, many of you take advantage of this. Here's what I would love. I would love for 20 families to join us in this before the summer hits. And here's why. Because you go off on vacation, and that's great, and that's awesome. Enjoy, have fun, take pictures, bring back a souvenir. I'd love one. okay? Wherever you go, I don't care. Even if you go to San Diego, bring me something. I'd love to see that, okay? Vacations are awesome, but here's what tends to happen. We go off on vacation, we have a ton of fun with our family, we're not here at church, and we're used to giving in a bucket or giving in the box and doing those things, and then money goes down in the summer, but ministry does not go down in the summer. You know if you have kids. We're taking kids to 3 different camps. We're doing VBS, we're doing a ton of stuff. Ministry ramps up for us. So what we do as a church is we prepare ourselves for summer giving, because when the wallet goes, okay, the giving goes. But you don't want that. I know you don't want that. You want to be intentional about giving your money to the Lord in the ministry of the church. And so here's what I would do. If you text that, you'll get a link, secure link to you right now. Very simple. Now, some of you don't even need to look at that, and that's fine. Some of you don't even know how to text, and that's okay. Right? Give it to the teenager next to you. They'll figure all the bank account stuff up for you. No, I'm just kidding. Right? But if you want to take that opportunity, I would challenge you to do it, and I would tell you right now, you're going to hit that giving goal. I love this. It's so easy for me to be intentionally generous and build a habit of generosity in my family. And it allows us to meet that giving goal every month and every year. Church family, let's pray. Father, we love you, and we thank you for who you are to us in Jesus Christ. God, we thank you that you are a great and wonderful giver. God, I pray that we would not have the problem that you saw here in Luke 12. God, that when you talked to this man, you saw greed in his heart. And God, I know you don't want that for any of us in this room. That it's you don't want our life to be defined by accumulating possessions, getting as much of my stuff as I possibly can. But God, that doesn't mean that you want to take wealth away from us. God, you want us to look at it different. Say, this is not my money. This is his money. God, I pray you would release the love of money in our heart and give us a love for you that is big, a love for you that is encompassing, a love for you that wants to see the world changed and the world come to know you, God. And it is so exciting to invest in life change, to invest in people coming to know you. God, there is nothing like seeing the lights go on in somebody and they say, man, I want to follow Jesus. Man, this makes sense. God, we can fund that. We can invest in that. And God, I pray just a special blessing on our faithful givers who continually support this church. And I know some in this room are even on a fixed income and they're still giving. And they're still being irrationally generous with their money. God, thank you for them. I pray you continue to bless them, continue to be over them. God, we want to give you this time as we reflect for a moment, as we think about the step we want to take with you. God, be with us and meet us personally, every individual in the room, right now. It's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.